Switch your...
Good evening, everyone. My name is Loretta Ross. I'm the Treaty Commissioner at the Treaty Relations Commission of Manitoba. And I want to welcome you to our four-part series entitled Treaties Moving Forward Together. Before we begin tonight, I do want to go over some housekeeping rules with everyone. First off, this session is being recorded and we will share the video with attendees tomorrow. All participants have been muted until our live question and answer period at the end of tonight's presentation. We do hope that you came with some questions and we encourage you to share once we open up the floor after today's presentation for live audience question and answer. Feel free to post your questions in the feed loop chat. It's to the right of the screen, or save them until the end when we open up the floor to live Zoom question and answer. So this four-part series is an opportunity for us to reflect on treaties and the treaty relationship and renewal. But before we begin, we do want to start our session with a song by our Treaty 3 elder, Sherry Copenace.
So the song that I'll that I'll render for you is a song that I referenced that belonged to my late great uncle, the late Clifford Skeed, and this is the song he always rendered prior to going into any one of the lodges. So I'll use my shaker. He always used a hand drum, but I'll use my shaker to do that. Inga bindiga kiwiwa Yahweh Yahweh Inga bindiga kiwiwa Yahweh Yahweh Inga bindiga kiwiwa Yahweh Inga bindiga kiwiwa Yahweh that was his song.
Thank you. Much thanks to Elder Sherry for sharing your beautiful gift of song and starting us off in such a wonderful way. So we believe as we're going through the series that before we can have any type of renewal and implementation of our treaty relationship, that first of all, we have to understand it. We have to understand the treaty relationship. And for many of us, a big part of that treaty relationship is understanding the views and the perspectives of each party. And in many instances, we have not come to understand and learn the First Nation perspective to the treaty making process. And so what we hope to do through this 4-part series is take you through a journey of understanding treaty. And of course, we do that beginning with our elders. Our elders set the stage, they provide the guidance for us as we move forward in forging this new relationship or renewing this relationship. And so tonight we will be hearing from our elders. And throughout this journey that we will take you on, we will also hear from Aaron Mills, who will help us to understand First Nation concepts of Indigenous law, how Indigenous people, how they operated their laws, because we hear a lot of Indigenous law and not many of us have an understanding of what that means. So he's going to walk us through his perspective on what that is. And that too will build our knowledge base for moving forward and understanding our relationship. We will also ask and have Brenda Gunn come and spend some time with us, and she's going to bring in the international aspect to the treaties through UNDRIP. We've heard a lot about UNDRIP and how UNDRIP is the framework for moving forward in a new relationship between First Nations people and non-First Nations people. UNDRIP has a strong connection to the treaties, and I think it will help us to understand how treaties really is that framework for us in forging and moving forward in a new relationship. And lastly, we're going to come back full circle and have a conversation between myself and Aaron Mills in terms of how do we connect all of these pieces together? How do we put these all together and move forward on this path? And how do we do that, each of us, not just the governments, but as citizens as well? So we hope that each of these series that we bring to you will build on each other and help to form and guide you in understanding treaties. So tonight, we will be starting, as I mentioned, with 2 of our council members. They're going to set the stage for us and look at the true spirit and intent of the treaties. And we're going to do that through an elder's perspective. And so at this point, I'm going to stop talking and introduce you to our esteemed elders. So with me tonight is Elder Florence Paynter and Elder Harry Bone. And Elder Florence Paynter is an Anishinaabe Kwe and Treaty 1 elder originally from Sandy Bay First Nation. She is a wife, mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother. In her youth, Elder Paynter attended residential school and has worked tirelessly throughout her life to foster awareness and deepen our understanding of the intergenerational impacts of residential schools. Elder Paynter currently sits on the Elders Council for the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs and the Treaty Commission of Manitoba. In addition to that, she is a Speakers Bureau for the Treaty Relations Commission of Manitoba and is often invited to speak on various issues, including the numbered treaties, residential schools, and the impacts of colonization. For the past several years, Elder Paynter has been invited as a guest lecturer at the University of Winnipeg. As a recognized knowledge keeper, she sits in an advisory capacity to the National Council of Elders at the world-renowned Turtle Lodge in Saugeen. She is also an elder in residence at the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation. She was recently recognized for her many years of cultural leadership at the 2021 Keeping the Fires Burning, where she was inducted into the Circle of Honor. So we are honored to have Elder Paynter with us. And also here tonight with us, with Elder Paynter and myself, we have Dr. Elder Harry Bone. Elder Bone is a Treaty 2 elder from Agowiidiwinan, Ojibwe Nation. He was raised by his grandparents who taught him the importance of maintaining ties to language, land, and culture. Their influence and teachings helped him to become a strong supporter of First Nation rights throughout his life. Elder Harry Bone is currently the chair of the Council of Elders for the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs and the Treaty Relations Commission of Manitoba. He maintains a close relationship with the Treaty Relations Commission of Manitoba, and we're happy that he does that. He acts as a special advisor and is involved in many of our initiatives, such as treaty education and the Speakers Bureau. He is also an elder in residence at the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation and a member of the Turtle Lodge. He also serves as a member of the National Elders Council of the Turtle Lodge. So I welcome you both to the session. We will entertain audience questions throughout or through the online chat at the end of the presentation. But let's start first with the first question. Let's talk about spirit and intent of treaties. What do we need to know and understand with respect to the spirit and intent of treaties? And maybe I'll turn to Elder Paynter if you could walk us through some of your thoughts on what the spirit and intent of treaties mean.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and thank you for the opportunity and the invitation to come and speak on something that we want people to understand, the spirit and intent. And I think when we talk about spirit and intent, it's important for us to make people understand exactly what it is, what we mean from a First Nations perspective. I welcome each and every one of you, and I also want to acknowledge that I do carry a spirit name, and I do carry, my clan is from the Bear, and I'm also from Treaty 1 territory. And I normally would say all of that in my language. And I know that it's very critical for us when we look at the spirit in which the treaties were made. I think there's many considerations. And I also want to acknowledge the fact that we had treaties. But tonight, we are focusing on the treaties that were made in 1871. And it is to say that before 1871, our people had treaties with one another. But tonight I really do want to focus on from 1871 and to look at the understanding of it. And the reason I want to do that is because I think it's important for all of us to begin to build that knowledge together. So I want to do a quick review in terms of how it is that we came to the treaty making process. First and foremost, I think that as a people, we are very grateful for what the Creator has given us. And I know that as a people, we have a history of knowledge that tells us about how our ancestors that later went into the treaty had so many principles in which they based their sovereignty. And I think when I do speak in my language, it is to say that I am a sovereign, and I'm also from Sandy Bay First Nation. And I know that when the treaties were made, they were done on a nation-to-nation basis. The other thing that I really wanted to press on is that our treaties are based on our inherent rights, and it's based on the fact that we were placed here on Mother Earth, and which we called Turtle Island now because of the boundaries that were created. But I do know that all of Turtle Island, including into the States, was all part of the initial original boundary of our people. I also want to acknowledge that, our spirituality played a very big part when our forefathers went into the treaty making process. And I think this is where we need to have a clear understanding that Canada, the word itself, translates to Canada. It's a very sacred land. And I believe that with the sacredness comes and is found in how we express ourselves in our language. So I know that from the treaty making process, there were so many principles that were considered. And some of these principles, because we have a large land base in which the Creator had placed us. But we also do have a shared history as a people with the settlers and with the people that were designated to be the representatives of the crown. Canada was given the obligation from the crown to implement the treaties, but I think that it must be understood that our treaties are with the crown, and that's with Queen Victoria, and through the generations, how it has transformed into what it is today, and it continues to be that significance that our people hold and will always go on that basis as we approach the spirit and intent of the treaties. Well, we also look at when we look at our form of government, and I mentioned that I am from the Bear Clan, and the reason I mentioned that I'm from the Bear Clan because I think there is an indication that our people went into the government, to the treaty making process when they were the signatories. And if you look at the history of it, look at the history of the document, look at some of the writings or sketches, there's imprints of a bear paw, there's imprints of whatever clan our people represented at the time and signing of the treaty. So that's very important for people to know and to understand that we do have a form of self-governance. And I think when we did the nation-to-nation basis, I think also attest to the fact that we were recognized and acknowledged as being a nation. So I think that's important for people to know. And we also have our connection to the spirituality being the very, very strong connection to the spiritual realm, that when we speak, we are speaking from our heart, we are speaking from our spirit. So I know when the treaty making process was being initiated, that our people went into ceremony and they just didn't go to the table to discuss the treaties, that everything they did was for the generations 7 generations ahead. So when we talk today of anything, it is important for us to remember that we are always going to be speaking from that viewpoint as well, that what we say and do today, it has to impact the things that are going to be the future for our children, and it includes our children yet to come. So when we speak about the spirit, it encompasses all of who we are as Anishinaabe people, as the different nations of people that are represented in Canada. And I also want to acknowledge, that it's important for us to be able to move forward, because I think that when we are doing some negotiations, that as decision makers, you also need to have that information, because our people and your ancestors came into this land to look for something better than what they had in their country, or for whatever reason that people have come to this country. You have totally benefited, and you have benefited because our people are a kind, gentle people, and we continue to reach out. We continue to try and lift our spirit, and try and continue to be who we are inside, and that is why it is important for us to know the spirit of why we went into the treaty making process, and it's going to continue. And I really believe that together we can move forward. There's so many opportunities that I see happening, and I think we need to continue to create these opportunities for one another. And because as the world was awakened by the finding of all the bodies of our children, I think it was a great spiritual wake-up call for us, to do something. And it is through these findings that we carry that message, we carry that voice for those children that didn't have the opportunity to be able to benefit from what we are trying to benefit all of us as a people together. And we believe that we share our country very freely. There hasn't not been a person that's been turned away. We've welcomed you, and will continue to welcome you. And I say miigwech for again the opportunity to be able to speak something that is very dear to us as elders, and to promote that togetherness, that understanding, that collective understanding, in order for us to be able to work together side by side. And I've seen so many good things happening, so with that, I want to say miigwech. Again, thank you for that opportunity to be able to talk to each and every one of you. And I also thank you as well. Miigwech.
Thank you, Elder Paynter. And it just conjures up a lot of questions and thoughts that I have, but I'll hold off on that myself, as I know some of our audience is no doubt thinking of them. And I think we'll turn now to our dear friend, Elder Bone, and ask Elder Bone if he could share some thoughts as well around the spirit and intent of treaties.
Amigotcha, bonjour, Antinoy Magnetok, Jesus, Ndapinikas, Mikinak Joinemik, Sagdal Kong beyond the step. Agowiidiwinan, Anishagi Pitasha the Mod, Minjodi Chanshnavik, Aningi. Good afternoon or good evening, my friends. It's always important to talk about our treaties from our perspective, not from the Western perspective, from ours. That's why the languages are important right at the outset. I want to emphasize that our rights come through our languages, through our ceremonies, through our teachings, and it doesn't come from someplace else. I always make reference to my grandmother and my grandfather. They were born in 1880s, so they're still fresh when they were young, in their lives when the treaties were discussed at that particular time. So that's why those words are very, very important. The English words, the treaty, the spirit and intent of treaties. Why were treaties made? Why were they like that in terms of ceremonies? So I think that's important for us. So I think the languages of our people is a source of who we are. So we always talk about it from that sense. As my grandmother often said, if one day you lose your language, you're going to lose your how you think as an Indian person, Anishinaabe person. You have to use somebody else's language to explain who you are. And that's exactly what happened to us. The English language now is a language that we use. That's someone else's language, that's someone else's concepts, someone else's law. That's the reason why we're in a hell of a mess today, because of that process. That's the purpose for the government through the Indian Act, residential schools, to deny us those very simple rights about our languages. But the spirit of our language, the spirit of our treaties is important because that's when Florence talks about them. It's what the Creator has given to us. Agowiidiwinan is important for us. That's the spirit part of it. We have teachings that are associated with, and those words are in the language of our people. In other words, it's love and respect, kindness, and all that kind of stuff. Those are the spiritual gifts that we got from the Creator. So that's the spirit and intent of our treaties were. The spirit of our people were guided by the Creator to make sure that we make that connection. That's why we call them sacred laws. The first laws for our people are called sacred laws. And that's that word spirit and intent of the treaty. The intent of the treaty is also very important because the intent was what did we want to be at the time of treaty. There's a number of things that were not negotiated, and those were our languages, our belief systems, our faith, and who we are as First Nations people. So that's why our languages and our ceremonies are important because that's our source of who we are as nations. As treaty was made 150 years ago, that term, of course, is not Anishinaabe word. Agowiidiwinan. Agowiidiwinan simply means relationship, sharing this great land. So that's what it means. So for us, I think, Agowiidiwinan is what we talk about all the time, what the Creator's given to us. The ones that I always talk about, is I saw my grandmother at a very early age about our ceremonies as a pipe ceremony. That's my favorite topic because I like to share that with you all the time because it's who I believe, taught me about who we are as nations, who we are as sovereignty, and who we are as people, and our identity, and our constitution. That's for our pipe ceremonies. And as you watch very carefully at a pipe ceremony, the elder will make that circle point upwards to the skies. That's to acknowledge there's only one Creator for all of us, all of us. That's to mention that the Creator for all of us. Circle makes that circle points downwards and to acknowledge the earth, to make sure that the natural laws for our people are honored. So as he makes that circle, to himself, that on behalf of all of us. So the thing to remember about that pipe ceremony is the forced three directions, one to the Creator, one to the land, and one to us as people. The Creator is the sacred laws, the earth is, of course, there's our natural laws, and then we as humans are the human laws. But we've been blessed as people, all of us, from wherever you come from, we've been blessed with four distinct gifts. That's the languages for our people, the teachings of who we are, the history to understand where we come from, and the journey that we have in our lifetime. See, all of us have a responsibility and obligation in our lifetime to make sure that we carry out, what the treaties were meant to be. So I think for all of us, the ceremonies are important. They're hidden sometime, but the grandfathers and grandmothers of our time, kept these treaties for ourselves. So that's why we talk about these things. For us, I think, to talk about treaty is about who we are as people. Agowiidiwinan, as my grandmother often said, it's our treaties that was based on who we are as nations. So I think as we talk about, that very word, the Anishinaabe, Anishinaabe is in other words, it's indigenous law. Anishinaabe, Anishinaabe, Agowiidiwinan. So that's where these words. So that's why I emphasize, and because the treaties were based on our languages, on our ceremonies 150 years ago. That was our source. On the Crown side, they also had an obligation, a mandate, what they come from and where their rights come from. But ours came from, through our language and our ceremonies. So that's the reason why, the government of the day 150 years ago thought it was their right to, take away our rights, take away our languages, through the residential schools. So that's what they has created for us. But for us, I think it's important as we talk about with our treaties. See, that's why the Treaty Commission was established some 15 years ago. One is objective, of course, public education, public awareness, to talk about who we are, the true history of our people. Because the academics that told us that it's important that our perspective, not only the Western perspective, is included in our talks, the perspective from our side. That's why the Treaty Commission took the journey to interview some 200 elders here in Manitoba in their communities on focus groups and one by one to make sure that we understand what our rights are from the treaty's perspective. And we spoke in their languages. As you probably know, here in Manitoba, we have 5 distinct speaking groups: the Coda, the Cree, the Anishinaabe people, the Dani, and of course the Island Lake people. So we spoke in their languages to make sure that we recorded all the things that they said about our people. The reason for that is because we realized it's our perspective, it's through our languages, for our own knowledge. That's what we are. Because the academics told us that history has always been written from one perspective, and that perspective, of course, Western perspective, Western thought. That's how Western law now becomes a major pro in our situations. But I think, from our side, you see now the government sees fit because the general public thinks, the awareness of treaties is important, who we are as nations. So that's why, there's that drought about who we are as people. But going back to treaties, then why that's important, because when we agreed to treaties, we agreed to a number of things to share this great land. As you probably know, 150 years ago, especially here in the prairies, the number of treaties. There was 2 objectives that the federal government had. One was to build a railway across the great nation. The other one, of course, is immigration. We welcome that opportunity, but we also said to the government of the day, we want to maintain the original spirit of our people, the languages, the ceremonies, who we are as nations people, and the way that we look after ourselves. So I think it's important to go backwards and to make sure that that's where we come from. So that's why the elders of today, the elders of yesterday, the elders before them, emphasize the ceremonies of our people important, because if we don't go backwards, because we start relying on the English perspective, the English law, the Western part. So that's why we're in a mess right now in our communities, because we simply didn't follow the original gifts of our people, to make sure that we maintain who we are as nations. So every time you do a pipe ceremony, every time you witness a pipe ceremony, it's a declaration of our sovereignty, our nationhood as rights as people, as nations. So that's what it is. That's our law. That's our constitution. It's based on 4 principles. It's the languages for our people, the teachings for our people, the history of who we are, and the journey that we have. Those were the gifts by the sacred laws and the natural laws. So I think we need to come from that perspective. Otherwise, we're falling into the eyes and the hands of the government, because it's what happened under 50 years. That was the intent for them. So as we talk about who we are as treaties, I think then we need to have that discussion. That's why the Treaty Commission has great has done great things for us, teaching treaties in the classrooms, but not only, but public awareness, also discussions amongst elders, what our treaties are all about, who we are as nations. So Anishinaabe Moina is a word we use for languages and our people. So I think it's important that we do that. But we also have ceremonies that we conduct all the time, whether Sundance, Madarian teachings, pipe ceremonies, sweat lodges, whatever ceremonies that we have. We simply exercise the rights of who we are as people. Agowiidiwinan is an important part. Because my grandmother was the best teacher of my lifetime, because I started to learn about our ways in the 50s and 60s. As you probably know that the year 1951 is an important year for us, because that's when the Indian Act was revised, that they allowed us to speak in our languages, to do ceremonies openly at that particular time. So I was raised in those terms, what our ceremonies, our pipe ceremonies, sundances, sweat lodges, and all those things that happened those days. And so I was forced up to raise by my grandparents to make sure that I understand what our ceremonies are all about. So for us, I think then we need to go backwards, because that's why our organizations led by our chiefs, and sometimes we never go back to our source, who we are. We follow the government's wishes. It's the Western law and the civil law that they practice here in Canada. But I think the Indigenous law is now on the scene. The Indigenous law is based on the treaty perspective, on the languages and ceremonies of our people. So I think that's where it's got to come from. For us, I think it's important, that we need to teach young people what, who they are as people, teach what, what treaties are all about, our ceremonies are all about, especially the language. The language is the key thing, and because, as my grandmother would say to me that time, if one day you lose your language, you'll lose how you think as an Indian person. You'll just have to use somebody else's language, somebody else's ideas, someone else's beliefs to trying to explain who you are. The sad part of it is that's where we are today. Now, we're using somebody else's concept, somebody else's law, trying to explain who we are. And the government just walks over us, for the crisis that we have in our communities. So for us, as in public educators, as elders, we stress upon, in our youth, it's our history, it's through our languages, through the stories for our people, through the gifts for our people. That's what's important for all of us. So I think, then as we talk about treaties, as we talk about this series that the commissioner is talking about, to set, one side for us to have that discussion. First of all, she wanted to make sure that, we have the elders' perspective to make sure that, our treaties are based on, what our knowledge, our treaty knowledge from our languages. You see, the Treaty Commission, commissioned, was able to, consulting with the professors. The professors told us that, what's important about is your perspective as well, because our history has always been written by somebody else. That somebody else is that Western thinking, Western thought. Now they said, it's your perspective, your side. Even the Canadian law now tells us, the federal government now tells us, now the Supreme Court tells us, the oral history of our part. That's why Indigenous law is now becoming the scene. That's why, in our institutions, they're starting to understand why the language is important to our Indigenous languages. So for us, I think, as we talk about these things, we talk about from our perspective, from our side. That's our thoughts. Agowiidiwinan, I think it's important for us. So for us, I think, that it's nice to have these kind of dialogue, these kind of discussions, so that people could understand, what their true nature, the true spirit of our treaties are, the true intent of our treaties are. See, we know as Florence has mentioned, we agreed to share this great land, but we maintain to have certain rights for our people. That's the languages for our people, the ceremonies for our people, the history for our people, and the way we do things. Yes, we agreed to share the land, but we wanted to have equal justice, equal opportunities to do the kind of things that we want to do. That's what we agreed at treaty time. But the government of the day, did a good job, tried to finish us off, through the process of civilization assimilation. So that's what happened in the last 150 years. So the Indian Act, residential schools. So we're here today, 2021 now. We have most elders now, than Turtle Lodge and elsewhere, that talk about who we are as nations. So I think these kind of discussions are important. So with that, then I want to thank you very much for this brief time to say a few words. So,
Well, thank you, Elder Bone and Elder Paynter. And I think I want to take this, the next few minutes before we open it up to the audience to maybe ask a couple of questions myself and maybe ask you to elaborate a little bit. And I want to go back to Elder Paynter, and you covered a lot of things in your presentation. Oftentimes when we think about treaties or what we think we know about treaties, a large part of it, at least if we've been trained in the Western world, is we come back to the written text, right? The written text has been the guide for many of us, whether we're politicians, legislators, ordinary people. What does it say in the treaties? People often want to say, well, what does it say in the treaties? Let me read the treaty. And you can certainly do that. But when we're talking spirit and intent, and Elder Bone touched on this when he said the Supreme Court of Canada has said, listen, we have to, if we're going to understand treaties, we have to understand that First Nation perspective. We have to understand the intent of the parties at the time of entering treaty. And so that gives an opportunity or a voice for First Nations people to share and for people to listen finally in many ways, right, what that perspective is. So when you were speaking about First Nations people coming to treaty and they brought everything essentially with them, land, their language, their history, everything, it wasn't just a written document, right? Something simple like that. They brought everything with them. And you talked about like the span of time, and there's a great concept, and I know I've heard you both talk about it, and I'm hoping you can elaborate a little bit on it. And I'm going to say it in Anishinaabe, so I hope I say it right, and you can certainly correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's Agowiidiwinan, right? Agowiidiwinan is kind of like, from what I understand, kind of linking. Can you maybe talk a little bit about what that means and its relation to treaties and treaty making for First Nations peoples?
Definitely. Miigwech, Agowiidiwinan.
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 Miigwech.
That's a term that is used in a couple of contexts that I can relate.
Mm-hmm.
One is from a mother's point of view, right? It's our connection and how we came from the spirit world, and how the Creator made it possible for us to come to this physical realm we call Earth. Mm-hmm. And that also entails our spirit that we are given at that time, and that spirit that we will work with on our physical time on Earth. Mm-hmm. And we often refer to that as our spirit, or a little blue light that is inside each and every one of every individual, whether you're from this country or not. We came through the same way, and we're going to go back the same way. Another level of understanding of it is when the treaties were made, it's almost like there's the written text and there's also the oral text. The oral text, or the oral way, is our way. And it's been through generations, intergenerationally, and we sit and we are told about our history. We are given all the teachings that Dr. Bone was referring to, through our ceremonies, through our songs, through the gifts that were given to us Anishinaabe people. That's the medium of how Agowiidiwinan, Indiana, whatever it is. So as a mother, I transfer that knowledge to my children in the hopes that they too will transfer that knowledge to the grandchildren and so on, right? So it's almost like yeah, it goes. And that's why when we talk about 7 generations, we always think ahead that whatever it is that we say and do has to be in a good mind, in a good spirit, because it's going to impact what we say today may impact our children yet to come. So that's that term, Agowiidiwinan, and maybe Harry, Dr. Bowen might have another.
Do you want to add to that, or?
Yeah, I think that's an important word, Agowiidiwinan, meaning it's a linkage, meaning that we have to go to the source of who we are. The gifts that the Creator's given to us, right to the source, not in between, not in a few years ago or 100 years ago, but to the original source. That means that we're linking ourselves to the beginning of time, what the Creator's given to us. And we've talked about the sacred laws and natural laws, that kind of stuff. We have to make those connections. Otherwise, we didn't start here, what is now Manitoba and Canada, when the Europeans arrived. We were very much alive, practicing our traditions and our ceremonies and our languages before the Europeans arrived here. Even before treaty was signed, we still exercise those kind of rights. So in other words, we have to make that linkage all the way backwards, not to follow the white man's, how they amended the Indian Act from time to time, their legislation, but the gifts of our people. If you listen very carefully in our languages about ceremonies, you can hear the elders as they talk about the history. It goes backwards. Even the languages for our people, there's a difference in our languages. There's one language that speaks in everyday life. There's also the languages of spiritual connections. When an elder speaks in Anishinaabe language, you can tell it's deeper. There's also the language, the more sacred. So our various sacred, the ceremonies, the languages of our people. That's to make that connection to the source of our people. So that's what Agowiidiwinan means. You make that linkage, and not in between, not when the Europeans arrived here, but that connection. So that's why those words are important. Anishinaabe words are important. So if you drag that word, it simply means Agowiidiwinan, meaning that there's a series of links that we make over thousands of years that we had over the years. So I think it's important for us to use those kind of words, and translate them into the way that we see them. So that word Agowiidiwinan is an important word.
Thank you, and thank you for the proper pronunciation, and I will work on that. Now, there's another concept that, and I'm going to turn to Elder Bone to maybe respond to this. But at the time of treaty making, and again, in looking at the context of the negotiations or the conversations that were there, one of the phrases that for First Nations people is important as they've entered into treaty making with the view to the future for themselves and for generations and for First Nation way of life to continue. But there's also a phrase that the commissioner had said, and it's, as we enter into these, we give you, and you could probably correct me on this too, but what we give you is on top of what you already have. And that's an understanding that First Nations people have. Can I maybe ask you to elaborate a little bit on that phrase and that understanding?
Yes, I think that's an important term to use, and to recognize that the Treaty Commissioner 150 years ago, when he's talked about to our people, especially in Treaty 6, he made reference to this very important word. What he said is recorded. If you want to find it, it's recorded. It simply says, as a Treaty Commissioner, what I'm offering you for treaty is on top of what you already have. So what does that already have? You already have is those 7 principles that I mentioned to you, our sacred laws, our natural laws, and the 4 gifts of our people, the languages, the teachings, and our history and our way of life. See, that's what, he said that I'm giving you in treaty on top of what you already have. He had no right to give any land. The land didn't belong to the treaty commissioner at that time. The land was belonged to us. But I think, for us, that's what he said that we already have. So that's why, those treaties, that was discussed 150 years ago, our languages, our ceremonies, our history, our way of life was not there in negotiation because that's what the treaty commission means. On top of those things that we already had, that's our ceremonies, our languages, our teachings, our way of life, in a way that we conduct ourselves, to speak for ourselves as well. So I think it's important to make sure that then we go back, to these terms. These terms are very important because then he meant something when the treaty commissioner mentioned that. So with that, Jimmy,
Okay, I'm going to ask you another question. I think we have a couple minutes before we kind of open it up, so I'm going to take advantage of the time that I have with you. And Elder Bone, you talked about this in your when you were talking about spirit and intent, and I think it's something that I'd like to ask both of you to elaborate on or give your understanding. You said, and here I am going to practice my Anishinaabe again, Agowiidiwinan is plural, I know. Agowiidiwinan, and I think about this all the time, and here I come to say Agowiidiwinan. I knew I had it, it wasn't connecting. And you talked a little bit about it, but if you could maybe just talk more on what does it mean? Not just the literal, of course, there's the literal translation of it, but the concepts behind it and why it's important that we understand what that means.
That term, there's a singular one and a plural one. Agowiidiwinan is one treaty, treaty one. Agowiidiwinan is one treaty. Agowiidiwinan is several treaties, more than one treaties, 1 to 11. But that word Agowiidiwinan simply means that then you establish a relationship. You put something on top of the other. See, that's what the commissioner meant. That Agowiidiwinan, what the commissioner says, what I'm offering you in treaty is on top that I already have. So it means that connection. You put it together. So that's that relationship is forever. Then is there forever. And that's why those terms that in a treaty metal that you often make reference to, as long as the sun shines, the grass grows, and the water flows. It's that connection. It's that relationship that's important for us. So that's what Agowiidiwinan means. So that word treaty has an important meaning, turning it into our language. Treaty is about relationship. Treaty is about that human relationship. We agreed to certain things, but we also agreed to maintain and to keep some of our own rights at that time. So that's what Agowiidiwinan means to us.
Elder Paynter, did you want to add?
I certainly do. It's very interesting. I know that I give you on top of what you already have. And I think it's an acknowledgement of what we have as a people. That we are nation to nation. We have our nationhood, and we have our sovereignty. We have our own way of doing what we do. And I know spirituality plays a big, big part in our lives and has always been a big part of our lives and will continue to be, because that is our link, that is our connection, and that's how we are as a people. Like with the gifts that we have been given, I think we have really held true. And what makes us hold true is embedded in our language. It's embedded, it's in our spirit. And we believe in the Creator. And we believe that when we made these handshakes, that all of creation was witness to that. So that's why we can never break that treaty. Our treaties was blessed by the Creator.
Miigwech, thank you very much. I'm wondering if we do have some questions. If there's isn't, I have another question that I can perhaps share with you or ask. And it kind of leads to some of the things that you're talking about, Elder Paynter. We have language, we have history, we have ceremonies, and it refers back to Elder Bone saying, what is it that First Nations people already had on top of what you already had? And sometimes that's where the question goes, what is it that we already had? And here's another phrase, and I'm going to try for the third time to say it and ask you to maybe elaborate. And it's Aja Minagowiidiwinan. Aja Minagowiidiwinan. I hope I'm saying that right. And I think that helps us if we're looking, how do we begin? Whether you're a First Nation person or not a non-First Nation person, but I think there's a task here and a path forward, regardless of which treaty partner you are. But I think that phrase or that word, Aja Minagowiidiwinan, am I saying it right? Is helpful to us. And I'm going to ask you if you could elaborate a little bit on what that is, because I think you've said it, but I think people still need to hear it through words like that. So who wants to start?
Okay, I'll start. That word is an Anishinaabe word, of course, Miinigowiidiwinan. Miinigowiidiwinan is, in English terms, what was given to us, and to us, of course, are given to us by the Creator. So that's what Miinigowiidiwinan means. If you drag that word, then it reflects to the spiritual connection. Miinigowiidiwinan. Aja means simply that you are already given. You are already given, the gifts of the Creator. So you don't need to ask for them anymore. Aja, Aja means that you're already given these rights. So you don't need to ask for them. So that's what Miinigowiidiwinan is all about. But we use that term on the spiritual basis on our discussions about who we are as nations. In other words, what that word means is we were already given these rights by the Creator. Where are we going around chasing around looking for these rights? They're already within us. By our Creator. So why are we running all over the place? United Nations, the Supreme Court, all over the places. When our rights are within our hands. So that's why that term Aja Miinigowiidiwinan, meaning all of us. As Florence has mentioned about that little light, the Spirit in all of us, we were given that already. So that's the gift that the Creator has given to us. And nobody will ever take that away from you, no matter what might or how strong the government is. That's the right between you and the Creator. So Aja Miinigowiidiwinan. In other words, that's what that word means. If you listen very carefully about those ceremonies, if you listen to the ones that speak our languages, you'll hear these words, because in their prayers, that's what they use in the languages of our people. So,
Elder Paynter?
Aja Miinigowiidiwinan. Already, you have an inherent right to all the gifts that we were born with, and I think that there's an understanding of how closely connected we are to the land. We are very close to the land, and it's almost like we are the land, right? Mm-hmm. And we are the stewards, internationally, globally known as stewards of our land. And why is that? Because I think, again, it has to do with recognition that we have these Aja Miinigowiidiwinan that we carry. And I go to the story about, how this braid of sweet grass represents us as a people, our mind, our body, and our spirit. but it also represents your mom, your dad, and yourself. You know, that connection and the strong bond that it has and how it's connected. You see how it's connected through that braid? So nothing should break it, right? So, and then we have the trees, and often the cedar tree is represented, you know, and that should represent another gift that was given to us. And also the rocks. You know, the rocks are the oldest beings. Remember, everything has a spirit. Every creation has a spirit. That's our belief, and we know that because we know that the neighbors, the people that have come on, we know they talk to their animals too. We know even they talk to the trees, right? But we were frowned upon doing that, but we never lost faith. We just keep doing what we do because those are Agowiidiwinan, and that's the understanding that you know, and we can use so many other examples, but I think you kind of get the idea how closely we are connected to the land and connected to the spirit realm and to the Creator.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that takes me to another thought when we're talking about treaty, and I think Elder Bowen had mentioned that with the treaty medal that we use to symbolize the relationship, and there's a lot in the treaty medal I think that people should be aware of. And if you could maybe elaborate on the phrase, I mean, we're all treaty people, but the phrase that for as long as the sun shines, the grass grows and the waters flow. If you can, you know, from that spirit and intent perspective, what does that mean? What does that mean for First Nations people?
Again, speaking from having been a mother, I think that's first and foremost is that creation and our ability to be able to carry that life, you know, and as long as we keep having children, that water from the Creator is going to flow. Because, you know, that's our connection. You know, and we look at the water that's what is happening to our water all over the world, right? I think it's a reminder that we really need to pay attention to our children and why we do what we do, right? It's that connection again. And as long as the grass grows, you know, and as long as the grass grows, the rivers flow, and as long as the sun shines, you know, that we will continue to have those treaties, and they're always constant, right? They're constant, and we're doomed when that sun doesn't come out, right? You know, and we're doomed if we stop having children. But we have a big responsibility to that life, right?
Right.
And that's what we're really trying to advocate for our young families, you know, to take back that responsibility, because I think there are so many government policies that have undermined us as a people, you know, and I think I can give many more examples of that. But I think just to answer the question of the saying that goes with the metals, you know,
Yeah,
that's how long our trees
Right. And so that speaks to, I mean, the time element that many people think, this past summer, we just commemorated or celebrated 150 years of
Yes.
both your treaties, Treaty 1 and Treaty 2, and that they're not frozen in time. They're not an event that happened 150 years ago, that it continues through those words and that phrase, for as long as the sun shines, the grass grows and the waters flow.
Yes.
And so, I do want to give our elder Bowen, because he's been quiet for the last few minutes, an opportunity to also speak about, some of the meaning behind that phrase to help us better understand why it's so important.
I think those are very important words. You hear that word all the time. As long as but the reference to the sun, reference to the grass, reference to the water, and but then if you go backwards to what I said, then we have spiritual laws, we have natural laws, we have human laws. The spiritual laws are connected to the sun. The sun, of course, is connected to the Creator, and that's our power of our people. Then this through our sacred laws. And the grass represents, the natural earth, the earth that we stand on. That's why we call it, the Mikinak, the grass, where the earth stands. And of course, the water, as Florence mentions, is about life. It's about human life. So as long as the sun shines, the grass grows and the water flows. It's a term. It's a nice term, but it's actually what you're doing there. You're expressing three important laws: the spiritual laws of our people through the creation laws, the ones we mentioned, the natural laws of our land, the air, the water, and all that kind of stuff. In the human life, the human laws that Florence talks about, the birth of people forever. So those terms are very important because that's what they mean. It was actually coined by Tecumseh when he was negotiating with Northern, before Canada was there, what those terms. So that's important words. You see those words all the place, how important they are, even a place where we were just a few days ago, about Mennonite University, about those words, as long as the rivers flows, that kind of stuff is there. So I think they're important in such sense because, those three words, the sun represents, the creation. It's not the Creator, it represents the creation. The grass represents Mother Earth, and the water represents people. Simply, it's as simple as it says, we believe in one Creator. This land is for all of us, and life is equal in the eyes of the Creator. So that's what they mean, so that's what that means. So I think, that we need to put, some action into those kind of words and the meaning of those words. They're not loose words. And the other thing that, of course, is the power of the energy of the sun. Is the energy. Without the sun, as Florence has mentioned, then we probably wouldn't survive. The earth wouldn't survive. We as humans wouldn't survive. So that's why that national kind of process is important about how to look after our earth, the waters that we have here. So those are important words, and the sun, the grass, and the water are very important words. That makes reference to in our belief systems, the sacred laws of our people, the natural laws of Mother Earth, and the human laws of our people. So with that,
Thank you both very much. I want to give our viewers an opportunity to type in your questions to chat with the elders. This is a unique opportunity, and I encourage you to ask questions. There's no question that's, if you think it's a silly question, many people are probably thinking the same thing. So please feel free and take advantage of the opportunity to ask the question of our elders. I can certainly continue to asking questions, but I want to provide a forum and an opportunity for you to share as well. So I'm keeping an eye on the screen here. And so again, I hope that you will ask some questions. In the meantime, I'm going to go back and ask another question. And we've kind of rolled into it a little bit. And this is another common phrase that we hear. And certainly when I first became commissioner was one that people challenged me on, and that is, we are all treaty people. We hear that, we hear it more now. Can you maybe share your understanding of what that means, and why do we say that we are all treaty people? And Who wants to go first? I think she's giving it to you, Elder Vaughan, first.
Okay, I think it's, then I remember when the then Commissioner Dennis Whitebird, then suggested us, then as is to initiate, then an interest in people. We coined that, he coined that idea where we are all treaty people. Of course, there's a negative impact both ways, from non-Indigenous people and from our people, but the very term treaty is what a relationship. When we made treaties here 150 years ago, even before then, and Florence has mentioned about treaties amongst ourselves. Treaty is about a relationship. So that's what it means, and that we're all part of it. We're all, part of that treaty. Whether you're non-Indigenous or Indigenous, and then we're all part of that process. Treaty is not only for one side. Treaty is for all of us. So the reason why that it was coined, because it sparks the interest of people to say, why are we saying that we are all treaty people? So I think it's just to kind of initiate a discussion, a dialogue, why that's important, because it simply leads up to the very first, the meaning of it, what treaty is, what relationship. We all have a human relationship amongst each other, and we all have rights equal in the eyes of the Creator. So that's what it means.
Elder Paynter.
I remember back in the day when we did the promotion of We Are All Treaty People. I was the voice behind the advancement of it, right? And it's been, I think, an opportunity for everybody to look at what does it mean we are all treated people, and we look at the partnerships. We look at what does it take to have a treaty relationship. Of course, it means that you need people, and you need people with ideas. You need people to partner with something. So it's always going to be about relationships, and how we build those relationships. I think through the Treaty Commission, right from the time that it had started 15 years ago, is it now? That I think the movement has been pretty incredible in terms of where we find ourselves today, and I really credit a lot to the commissioners that we've had, you being the third commissioner for the province, and I think that we've done some pretty amazing stuff under your leadership, which really speaks to what I'm referring to. And I think when we look at the relationships, sometimes it's hard for me to understand why a university or college will not recognize the knowledge that our people have, based on what we're talking about this evening. That's pretty deep knowledge to be able to share with people, to make them understand how do we as people in Canada move forward. And I think it's based on those understanding about what is treaty and what is the spirit and intent of treaties. And we've spent the evening talking about that. So forward, to making more partnerships, developing relationships in order to partner, so we can all be benefiting from whatever Canada has to offer, and it should be on equal footing.
Yeah. Okay, great. It looks like we are getting some questions, so you you don't have to listen to me anymore asking you some questions. I'm going to ask some questions that are coming through the chat. And the first one that I see is from Dan. And he's asking, or he's saying, the treaty relationship that was there when we agreed to Treaty 4 has changed over time. Where are we now today in the treaty relationship? And again,
let me respond that this way. Yes, the original treaties have changed for two reasons. One of them, the basic ones, of course, we abandoned our, the spirit and intent of our treaties from our perspective, through our languages, through our ceremonies. We've now gone to the other side to try and explain who we are. So the more we do that, then the more that we give in to, than what the treaty was meant to be for the Crown side. So that's why, and the Crown recognizes that, how weak we are in our languages and our ceremonies, because most of our leaders can't even speak our languages anymore, don't practice our traditions and our ceremonies. See, that's the strength of our people. And the Crown knows this, the Canadian government knows this. So that's why there's a change in shifts of what our treaties and like, than 150 years ago, and we are on equal basis. But today, because that we don't practice who we are as nations, we don't practice who we are, is the original spirit of our internal treaties, and those are the 7 directions of the pipe. We don't do those kind of things anymore. Then to honor the Creator, to recognize Mother Earth, then we're all human beings. The languages, our teachings, our history, our way of life. We've already thinking like Western men, just like at the beginning, as I said, as my grandmother said, once you lose your language, you're going to think like a white person. That's exactly where we are. So some of that is on our side. Some of that is the fault of us, not practicing our traditions. The more we do that, the greater, the lesser meaning, for our treaties. So we're part of that process. So I think, if you're going to retrieve, who we are as nations, you have to go back that way. The other thing too to remember is like, treaties were signed in groups, especially in Treaty 4. How many bands were there? They have to work as one unit to make sure that then they counteract what the government is doing to us. So that's probably that purposes. But the real answer there is we don't practice our traditions, we don't practice our languages, and we use white man's law anymore. Like there's no indigenous law on our side. We're practicing white man's law. That's why we're defeating ourselves. Can you ever imagine about playing hockey or playing football? Using your opposition's playbook and how you're going to defeat them? You'll never defeat them, because you're playing their rules. That's exactly where we are now. Rich.
Hey, Rich, thank you. I got lots of work to do, but thank you very much. I certainly understand the message that you're sharing. I'm going to ask a question here because we've got a number of them now. And please forgive me if I mispronounce your name. As you've seen, I've mispronounced a few things tonight, so please forgive me in advance. But it's from Pishka. And the question is, can treaties be adjusted and amended? And I don't know.
Well, I don't think, I think the content of the treaty could be amended, but we can't amend the original part of why we signed treaties. The source of our treaty was based on those 7 principles I mentioned. You can't amend those. Those are not negotiated for. Negotiation for, then resources for land, could be, amended to reflect, other times. But you could never go back, to try and amend, the original spirit and intent of our treaties, because the treaty was based on our nation, but as a rightful holders of the land. So you can go back that further. You can go backwards a bit, it's just to amend the process to negotiate for, the return of our lands, the return of resources, that kind of stuff, what was the original intent of our treaties. So yes, you can amend it, but not going back, to the original source, because then you can give up, the basic rights of our people. Those rights, of course, is the right to the Creator, to the land, in our languages, in our teachings, in our history, and the way we live. Can't negotiate those things.
Good. And Pishka has another question that I missed earlier, and perhaps I'll direct this to Elder Paynter. but what is your perspective on ceremony? What is the word for it, and how does one enter a ceremonial space and exit the sacred space?
It's a very special place, you know, and like anything else, there's protocols that are unwritten, and it's again, it's related to how much is being exposed to you as a child, right? But also there has been so much opportunity for our people to come back to ceremony and come back to reclaim and find their own spirit, ignite that fire that's within each one, right? And you can go to these ceremonies and be an active listener. And I remember when I woke up, when my spirit awoke, it was in the early 80s. Early 80s. You know, so in our journey, the spirit can be totally just going along. And then all of a sudden you come to a point, oh my goodness, where have I been all this time? Where has been my thinking? There has to be a better life than what I'm experiencing and what I'm witnessing. And then that's when you go inside, and that's they say that's the hardest journey to make, is into your heart. But in your heart is your spirit. And then once that is awakened, there is no stopping. There is no stopping. You want to know about your language. You want to know about your history. You want to know about how did our people survive before. You know, they've survived for thousands of years. And I know that, you know, they have survived because there's things that binded them together, very closely knitted people, right? We had our different land bases, you know, and we were referred to as being nomadic. But no, we weren't nomadic. We had our own places. But we did go from place to place, and we followed the seasons. We followed the movement of our food sovereignty. You know, but there was always a home base. And I think people need to understand that as well, right? That those are all important things that have sustained us as a people and will continue to sustain us as a people. And our job as elders has been really to try and provide those opportunities for people to come, and everybody's welcome. Nobody's going to be turned away, whether from this race or that race, because I think we all carry that spirit that needs to be awakened and needs to be transformed into something that has been different. And I usually ask people, think about where you are in life right now. Is that how you want to continue to live? Or do you wish for a better life? Right? And if you want a better life, of course you're going to seek what that life is. And I've gone to my elders and I've gone to our own people to get that history. And we have a very rich history. You know, there's no doubt in my mind that everybody would just love it. In fact, there's so many people that want to be us, right?
Mhm.
It's been good these days to be an Indian.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, thank you. And I think, on top of being an active listener, as you say, is to be an active observer. Watch what's being done, in terms of the ceremony that you're in. People do have different ways of doing ceremony. Respect that. Be humble enough to sit and kind of wait and observe, and you will learn, right? And as you said, most places are inclusive, they're welcoming, and so you have to come and enter and respect that inclusivity that's being offered to you. So I think I hope that helps our audience. There's another question here. What are the best ways for non-Indigenous persons to uphold the original intent of the treaties? Who wants to tackle that? Elder Bone?
Well, I think the best way for non-Indigenous people to to support is to make sure that they know their history as well. The history hasn't been good to us. The history has been very negative for the last 100 years, 150 years. The government did a good job at. So what non-Indigenous people have to do is reach backwards to reconcile their own history and to make sure that they know how the government operated, how they treated us. They have to keep awareness that they have to understand where their country is coming from, as well as from us as well, to reconcile, with our traditions, with our languages, and so forth. But I think, for non-Indigenous people to understand, they have to understand the true history of Canada to make sure that, that we had an equal opportunity, equal justice at the beginning of our treaties. That's what we asked for. Why were our languages denied, our ceremonies, that kind of stuff denied. So I think, for Indigenous people, they have to understand that process. So I think, they have to reconcile as well their history, because the history of Canada is also, built on false pretenses. For instance, doctrine of discovery, like, North America was never empty land when the people arrived here. We were very much alive. But so that history, it's not only one side. So non-Indigenous people to understand, they have to reach backwards. They really have to reconcile their history. Their history is also not very bright, to the way they treat people, First Indian people.
Okay, thank you. And there was a subsequent question very similar to that, Rhonda. I hope that also answers your question. I have a question from Karen, and she's asking, could the elders give suggestions on how to engage our young people in learning the spirit and intent of the treaties, and how to build our languages and teachings? Would you like to start that off, Elder Paynter?
yes, for sure. I think through the Treaty Commission, there's a very strong team that works together, and they work in classrooms. They work with teachers, and I had the opportunity to get my own kit.
Finally, yeah.
So when I went through it, I thought, oh my goodness, I wish I was still in the classroom, but I'm a little too old to be in a classroom anymore. But when I do go into the classroom, I think that there's great interest. And I think that, and I've often said that before, right? And I always credit my friend. I know he's watching. When we have been given the knowledge from our elders by going to ceremony and by sitting and listening and observing and taking in whatever it is that's going to make us a better person, we use that as a base. And then we go back into our own community and we go search people that we may have overlooked that carry that same information, but nobody ever came to offer them tobacco to share, right? So I think there's protocols that we follow, and there's protocols that we teach about,
Mhm.
in how to offer tobacco when something is being talked about, right? And I know that we use it as an opportunity to teach the children,
Mhm.
so if I had invited Dr. Bone to my classroom, I would offer him the tobacco in front of the classroom. And, so we can talk about, why am I offering you tobacco? I'm offering you tobacco so you can share the knowledge that you have with these young people. Because I think as the elders that have paid attention to our people, and because of our inner desire that we've accumulated that knowledge, and we are now recognized as elders and traditional knowledge keepers. And our role as that is to be able to teach it, right?
Mhm.
Because remember, it's a chain. We just keep teaching and we just keep modeling, so that's what we do. Yes.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. Thank you very much for that. There's a comment here from Norma, and I do want to acknowledge that. And she's saying, I would like to thank you for sharing the sweetgrass braid. Beautiful in structure and meaning, very binding in strength for mind, body, and soul for everyone. Yes, Norma, thank you very much for that. Another question that's coming forward from Alex, and he's asking, do you feel that our government leaders are understanding the spirit and intent of the treaties collectively?
Collectively is a real challenge.
Mm.
But I think, when we begin to speak to people, I think there's a relationship building opportunity that happens. And then from there, it's almost like it multiplies, right?
Mhm.
And that's how I think through the Speakers Bureau, I think that's the concept, right? Like we have incredible speakers on the Speakers Bureau that address many things that people may have, but our challenge is to get the leadership. We can't even get our own leadership collectively and unify them on some of the things that we really need to move forward with, right? But I think if we continue to meet with individuals, meet with groups, and it multiplies, right? And before you know it, we have allies that are forming all over the place.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I put my hope on that. Yes.
Yes, thank you. Here's another question from Michelle. And the question is, as a student of law and politics, wanting to change the colonial settler system from the inside out, what is the most critical step I can take to make a meaningful difference in advocating for honoring of the treaties?
I think that question is very critical for a law people that that represent us, especially our Aboriginal lawyers. First thing you need to do, of course, is to understand that Northern civil law and common law, that's their side. That's what you study when you go to law school. That's what you swore an oath, when you become a lawyer, is to protect their law. But I think, Indigenous law is not coming onto the scene as the Supreme Court decisions, through Delgamog and other cases, that happened to us, that oral history is now part of that process. So it's starting to happen now across the great country. Northern Indigenous law is not being taught strictly from our perspective. not using Western concepts, Western that kind of stuff. Through our languages, through our ceremonies, the Indigenous law has to be shaped on those principles. The principles as we as nations. So I think, if you know the difference there, and the northern, if you can go back to our traditions, what is the Anishinaabe laws? Anishinaabe Agowiidiwinan, and what are they? What are the indigenous laws of our people? You have to take a look at those first, and before you know the northern. So in other words, and the law profession, the law societies, the law institutions now, of course, have that one side, the Western law, the European concept. That's where it comes from. That's what we are taught as lawyers. But now some institutions are starting to recognize that Indigenous law, because the top court says that Indigenous law is important. So that's where we're at now. But we also have to be careful with these institutions, to make sure that our perspective is there. My good friend, Aaron Mills, I hope he's still listening. He always gives us this phrase: Indigenous law is not Indigenous version of Canadian law. Listen to those words. Indigenous law is by itself. It's not a version of our law into a Canadian system. So there's a big difference. So I think you have to recognize that, at the outset. Our law is different. It has had different sources. It has different meanings. So I think, to separate those things, we can never put our Indigenous law to try and fit into the Western law. That'll never work, because it hasn't worked before, and it'll never work again. So ours has to be separate. So, but there's an avenue, there's a form, there's a desire, there's an appetite for Indigenous law. That's why, then take a look at the institutions across Canada, University of Victoria, Regina, Alberta, the McGill University, that kind of stuff. They're starting now to recognize how important that is, because that's the necessary tool. Because do you know why? Because the general public, the general opinion tells us so. So that's why there has to be a change. So I think the opportunity is there for us to change that attitude. What laws. Our perspective is just as important as theirs. But I think then I want to go back to that phrase, because that's certain definition. Indigenous law is not Indigenous version of Canadian law. You can't fit our law into their system, because it'll never work. So I think Indigenous law has got to stand on its own. So thank you for that question, because that's an important question, and I hope that you'll keep working on that question, because I think that's an important part of it. Because our hope is in this lawyers to make sure they know the difference. Not to try and sell us what the Western law is all about, because the way that they're doing it now is they want to make money, so that's why they're staying with the Western law, because that's where the money is. So Indigenous law is important, to protect our rights, as Indigenous people. So pretty much.
Great, and yes, thank you very much for the questions. I think this brings us to the close of our session this evening, our talk, our time with the elders. But I do want to provide you each with an opportunity to have some closing remarks to our audience before we end the evening session. So I'll turn it to Elder Paynter.
Okay. Well, I want to say thank you again for the opportunity to come and share our thoughts and our perceptions and how we move forward. I think the topic has been interesting to explore, and in particular to unpack the spirit and intent of the treaties, which is all so much related to who we are as a people. There has been so many things done to us to try and change us, but that's not going to happen. I was born Anishinaabe. I'm gonna die Anishinaabe, and with that gift of life, I've also had the opportunity to learn from my elders and to really be able to transform myself into who I am today. And I want to say thank you to the people that have been a big part of that process for me and with me, and the ancestors and my relatives that were there, that were often considered people that did devil worshiping and all that. And I'm glad to say that, what was classified as the work of the devil is also what we're promoting today because it's so good. But because people didn't understand who we are and what we are, I think sometimes the thought, so hopefully we have been able to change some mindsets, and it's through action that we're going to see a change, a collective action. Miigwech.
Miigwech.
Just some quick words. The title of this series is, of course, very important, Agowiidiwinan, and those three words, spirit and intent of treaty. The word treaty is a process itself, it's a journey, but that journey was based on certain principles. What is the spirit of that journey? What is the intent of that journey? The intent of the journey, of course, was the gifts of our people through the pipe ceremonies, in our laws and natural laws of our people and the sacred laws. So you have to go backwards. You have to understand what that means, because like any law, any lawyer that's listening, then they have a concept. What is the spirit of the law? The intent of the law. They often tell us if the intent is greater than the law itself. For instance, intent to murder. You murder somebody, but if you intend it, means that it has greater weight. So as a result of that, so the intent of our laws, the intent of our treaties should have as much weight as the treaty itself. So that's why it's important to go backwards. I think that's why the commission that suggested that very title, spirit and intent of treaty, is important because we have to understand what our original law is all about, the original source of our laws. So that's the only place, as I mentioned before, because we're in a crisis now. We're using Western law, European law to try and advance our causes. And yes, we need that in a certain extent, but we have to build on our own laws as well, because they're going to out argue us every time we go to court, because it's in their favor. So I think the treaty itself is a process, but I think you understand what the intent was, the spirit of the treaty was all about. So I think if you can go backwards, I think you'll understand what we were talking about. So Miigwech, I thank you very much for giving us a chance to speak this evening. Miigwech.
Well, thank you. Thank you both for coming and agreeing to sit with the commission, sitting with myself and sharing honestly and openly your thoughts and your messages with all of us. And I know I sit with you often, but I learn something each and every time that I sit with you. And so I want to thank you so much for agreeing and sharing your thoughts with us tonight. And for our audience, thank you very much for your questions. And Elder Bone gave us a great segue into our next topic in terms of understanding Indigenous law, that it is not a version of Canadian law. And so that will bring us to our next series, which will be next week, in our second session, which is entitled, and I have to read it, Kinship Across Worlds, Unpacking the Political Power of Family. And that's with Professor Aaron Mills from McGill University. And we look forward to having Aaron with us here to share some of his thoughts. So again, thank you very much, Miigwech, and we'll see you next week.